Every morning was a battle for Gabriel. Ever since his wife walked away to chase a different life, his 5-year-old daughter Mia had become a shadow of fear. She clung to his clothes as if he might vanish into thin air. This was a man's greatest tragedy: a broken home, a lost career, and a daughter who was too afraid to let go of his hand. But how does a man with nothing left find the strength to start over? Why would a powerful businesswoman, a woman with a world of resources, reach out to a struggling father like him for help? What secret value did Gabriel possess that money could never buy? And what do children truly need to feel safe in a world that has failed them? We invite you to find the answers in today's story. Please support us by subscribing to our channel before we continue. The morning air in the suburbs of Ohio was cool and crisp, but inside the small house with the white picket fence, the air felt heavy. Gabriel stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee pot. He watched the dark liquid drip slowly, drip, drip, drip. Every sound in this house seemed louder since the silence moved in. That silence had a beginning. It started on a Tuesday morning. He remembered it clearly. The house was quiet, but it was a wrong kind of quiet. There were no breakfast smells. There was no sound of humming from the bedroom. When he walked into the hallway, the closet door was wide open. Half of the hangers were bare. His wife was gone. She did not leave a note. She did not say goodbye to their 5-year-old daughter Mia. She simply chose a different life with someone else. Gabriel looked down at his waist. He felt a familiar tug. There she was. Mia was standing right against his leg. Her small pale hand was clenched tightly around the fabric of his flannel shirt. She did not say a word. She just held on. She had been holding on for weeks. Gabriel knelt down so he was eye level with her. He tried to give her his best smile. "Good morning, sunshine," he said softly. "Are you ready for some oatmeal?" Mia did not smile back. She only tightened her grip on his shirt. Her eyes were wide and filled with a deep, haunting worry. It was the look of a child who expected the world to crumble at any second. In her young mind, the world had already crumbled once. If Mommy could vanish while she was sleeping, why wouldn't Daddy do the same? To Mia, Gabriel was the only thing keeping her safe from the big, empty world. If she let go of his shirt, he might dissolve into the mist. Gabriel reached out and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. He felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her everything would be okay. But he was a man of truth, and right now his own heart was uncertain. The struggle had become physical. A few days later, Gabriel had to take a shower. He tried to explain to Mia that he would be right behind the door. "I am just going to get clean, Mia," he told her. "I will be right here. You can hear the water. I am not going anywhere." But the moment the bathroom door clicked shut, he heard a small thud. It was the sound of a little body sitting down against the wood. Then came the scratching. Mia was leaning her back against the door, her fingers picking at the carpet. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just waited in a state of high alert. When Gabriel stepped out wrapped in a towel, she jumped up immediately. She grabbed his damp hand. Her palms were sweaty from fear. He picked her up and held her close. He smelled the scent of baby shampoo and felt her heart racing against his chest. The pressure was mounting from outside the house, too. Gabriel used to work at the large export fruit warehouse on the edge of town. He liked the work. He liked the smell of fresh apples and the rhythmic sound of the forklifts. But you cannot drive a forklift with a 5-year-old child clinging to your leg. He tried bringing her to the warehouse. He set up a small chair in the corner of the office. He gave her coloring books and crayons. "Stay here, Mia," he whispered. "Daddy is just 20 feet away. I am just loading these crates." But Mia would not stay. The moment he stepped toward the loading dock, she was behind him. She wandered into the path of a moving pallet jack. The foreman yelled. Gabriel had to drop everything to grab her. The boss was a stern man. He looked at Gabriel with pity, but he shook his head. "This is a warehouse," Gabriel the boss said. "It is not a playground. It is dangerous for her, and you are not getting your work done. I am sorry." Gabriel walked out that day with his final paycheck in his pocket. He sat in the car and put his head on the steering wheel. Mia climbed into his lap. She did not understand about bills or rent. She only knew that he was there. He tried to be resourceful. He signed up for a delivery service. He thought this would be the perfect solution. He could drive his own truck. Mia could sit in the passenger seat. They would be together. The first few days were an adventure. They sang songs on the road. But the reality of the American highway is harsh. The shifts were 12 hours long. The summer sun beat down on the windshield. The air conditioning in his old truck struggled to keep up. Gabriel looked over at his daughter. She was slumped over in the oversized seat. She was eating a piece of dry bread for lunch because he did not have time to stop. Her face was flushed from the heat. She looked so small and so tired. She should be at a park. She should be playing with dolls in a cool room. Instead, she was strapped into a vibrating metal box, breathing in exhaust fumes. Gabriel pulled the truck over to the side of a dusty road. He looked at his daughter and felt a wave of shame. I am a failure, he thought. I cannot even provide a normal life for my child. He looked at her sleeping face. Even in sleep, her little hand was resting on his arm. She was protecting him from leaving. That night, Gabriel sat in the dark living room. He looked at the walls. The house felt like a cage, but it was also their only sanctuary. He had a thought. If he could not go to the world, he would bring the world to him. He looked around the room. It was drab. It was filled with the ghosts of his old life. He stood up. He found some leftover paint in the garage. It was a bright, cheerful yellow, the color of a morning sun. He began to move the furniture. He pushed the heavy brown sofa against the wall. He rolled up the old stained rug. He began to paint. He painted until his shoulders ached. He painted until the room glowed. He went to a local thrift store the next morning. He bought soft cushions. He found a wooden train set and some picture books. He set up a small table with 4 little chairs. He was transforming his home into a daycare. Mia watched him with curiosity. For the first time in months, she saw a spark in her father's eyes. She helped him arrange the blocks. She didn't let go of his shirt, but she followed him with a little more bounce in her step. Gabriel sat at his kitchen table and opened his laptop. He began to type an advertisement. Safe and loving home daycare, he wrote. Experienced father offering a warm environment for your little ones. Emphasis on play learning and home-cooked meals. He paused. He knew the challenge. In this town, people expected a grandmotherly figure to run a daycare. They expected a woman. A tall man with calloused hands from the warehouse might look out of place, but he had no other choice. He clicked the post button. He looked at Mia, who was now sitting on the floor among the new toys. Please, he whispered to the quiet room. Please let this work. He walked over to the window and looked at the white picket fence. He had repaired that fence himself years ago. It was meant to keep the world out. Now he was hoping it would invite the world in. The house was ready. The toys were waiting. The walls were yellow and bright. But as the sun began to set, the phone remained silent. Gabriel picked up Mia and held her tight. They sat together in the yellow room, 2 souls waiting for a sign of hope. The silence was still there, but now it felt like a silence of anticipation. A new path was laid out. He just needed someone to walk through the door. The phone sat on the kitchen counter like a heavy stone. It did not ring, not on Monday, not on Tuesday. Gabriel spent his mornings dusting the small wooden chairs he had bought. He organized the colorful blocks by size and color. He made sure the yellow walls were spotless. But the house remained empty. Outside, the neighborhood was busy. He saw mothers pushing strollers down the sidewalk. He saw grandmothers walking toddlers to the park. Sometimes he would stand on his porch and offer a friendly wave. The parents would look at him. They would look at his large, muscular arms and his quiet face. Then they would look at the sign in his window, Home Daycare. Gabriel could see the hesitation in their eyes. In this part of town, people had old-fashioned ideas. A man running a daycare, a single man. It made them pause. It made them turn away. Gabriel felt the sting of their judgment. He was a father who would do anything for his daughter. He knew how to soothe a nightmare. He knew how to bandage a scraped knee. But to the world outside the white picket fence, he was just a stranger. A man who didn't fit the mold. Mia felt his sadness. She stayed close to his side, her small hand always finding his pocket. She liked the new yellow room. She liked the toys. But she seemed to be waiting for something too. She was waiting for the world to say it was okay for them to be happy. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Miles away in a glass tower that touched the clouds, Victoria was losing her patience. Her office was a cathedral of steel and expensive art. She was the CEO of a fashion empire. She moved through life with speed and precision. She solved problems with a signature on a check. She fixed crises with a phone call. But she could not fix her son, Parker. Victoria looked at her reflection in the window. She was dressed in a suit that cost more than Gabriel's truck. Her hair was perfect. Her life looked perfect. But her heart was racing. Her assistant knocked softly on the door. "The headmistress from St. Jude Academy is on line 1, the assistant said. Victoria closed her eyes. She knew what was coming. This was the third time, the third prestigious school in less than a year. Parker had gotten into another fight. He had thrown a chair. He had refused to listen. The school was sorry, but they could no longer accommodate his behavior. Victoria hung up the phone and leaned back in her leather chair. She felt a wave of exhaustion. She gave Parker everything, the best clothes, the most expensive toys, a nanny who spoke 3 languages. But the boy was a storm. He was 5 years old and already full of a strange, burning anger. She grabbed her tablet and began to search. She was tired of the soft, polished schools. She was tired of the teachers who looked at her with pity. She needed something different. She needed something firm. She scrolled past the fancy websites with photos of children in uniforms. She scrolled until she found a simple, plain advertisement. A man's name, Gabriel, a home day care. She looked at the address. It was far from the city. It was in a place she never visited. A man, she whispered to herself. Maybe that is what Parker needs. A man's hand to teach him discipline. Someone who won't be intimidated by a 5-year-old's tantrum. She didn't think twice. She picked up her phone and dialed the number. Back in the small yellow room, the phone suddenly came to life. The sound was so sharp it made Gabriel jump. He wiped his hands on his apron and reached for the receiver. "Hello," he said. His voice was deep and a little nervous. "I am looking for Gabriel," the woman on the other end said. Her voice was like cold silk. It sounded like authority. It sounded like the city. "This is Gabriel," he replied. "I have a son," the woman said. "His name is Parker. He is difficult. He has been asked to leave 3 schools. I need someone who can handle him. I am coming to see you this afternoon." She did not ask if he was available. She did not ask for the price. She simply stated her arrival. Gabriel looked at the phone after she hung up. He looked at Mia. "Someone is coming, Mia," he said. An hour later, a long black car pulled up to the white picket fence. It looked like a spaceship in the quiet neighborhood. The door opened and Victoria stepped out. She looked around the modest street with a sharp, calculating gaze. Then she reached into the back seat. She pulled out a boy who looked like he was ready for a fight. Parker had messy blonde hair and a scowl that looked too heavy for his face. He was wearing a designer shirt and expensive sneakers. He kicked at the dirt as they walked toward the porch. Gabriel opened the door. He stood there in his simple jeans and a t-shirt. He was a head taller than Victoria. He looked at her, and then he looked down at the boy. Victoria didn't wait for a greeting. "I am Victoria," she said. "This is Parker. I will be honest with you. He is a nightmare. The schools say he is unmanageable. I need to know if you can be firm with him. I need results." She reached into her purse and pulled out a gold credit card. "I will pay whatever you ask," she said. "Just make him follow the rules." Gabriel looked at the gold card. Then he looked at Victoria. Then he looked at Parker. The boy was staring at the floor, his shoulders hunched. He was waiting for the lecture. He was waiting for the man to raise his voice. He was waiting to be told how bad he was. Gabriel did not take the card. Instead, he moved slowly. He sat down on the top step of the porch. He made himself smaller. He became eye level with the angry little boy. "Hello, Parker," Gabriel said softly. His voice was warm, like a blanket. Parker looked up. He was surprised. He didn't see an angry giant. He saw a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I was just about to go into the backyard," Gabriel said. "I have a birdhouse that needs some paint. It is a big job for one person. Do you think you could help me?" Parker blinked. No one had asked him for help in a long time. Usually people told him to sit still. Usually they told him to stop touching things. The boy looked at his mother. Victoria was standing there with her mouth slightly open. She was ready for a list of rules. She was ready for a contract. She was not ready for a birdhouse. "Can I?" Parker asked. His voice was tiny. The scowl on his face began to soften just a little. Gabriel stood up and held the door open. "Come on in," he said. "Mia is inside. She is a bit shy, but she is very good at picking out colors." Victoria watched as her unmanageable son walked into the house without a single protest. She stepped inside behind him. The smell of the house hit her immediately. It didn't smell like the sterile, expensive air of her office. It smelled like cinnamon and wood wax. It smelled like a home. She saw the yellow walls. She saw the small table. She saw Mia, who was peeking out from behind a chair. Mia saw Parker and clutched her father's leg. But she didn't cry. She looked at the new boy with curious eyes. Victoria turned to Gabriel. She looked at his hands. They were rough and stained with a little bit of yellow paint. "You are not going to give him a list of consequences?" she asked. Gabriel shook his head. "He is 5, Victoria," he said quietly. "He doesn't need a judge. He needs a purpose, and he needs to know he is safe here." Victoria felt a strange fluttering in her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't had in years. It was the feeling of being understood. She looked at this man who lived in a different world than her. He didn't care about her empire. He didn't care about her gold card. He only cared about the boy. "Fine," she said. Her voice was less like silk now and more like a whisper. "I will leave him here for the day. I have a meeting at 4. I will be back then." Gabriel nodded. "We will be here," he said. Victoria walked back to her black car. She sat in the back seat and looked at the small house through the tinted glass. For the first time in months, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't check her emails. She just watched the front door. She thought about the birdhouse. She thought about the yellow paint. Inside the house, Gabriel led the 2 children to the kitchen. He gave them each a small apron. The silence of the house was gone. It was replaced by the sound of small footsteps. It was replaced by the sound of a new beginning. Gabriel looked at Mia. She had let go of his shirt to reach for a paintbrush. Then he looked at Parker. The boy was standing still, waiting for instructions. The storm had not disappeared, but the wind had died down. Gabriel smiled. He knew the road ahead would be long. He knew there would be challenges. But as he looked at the 2 children in his bright yellow room, he knew one thing for certain. The phone had finally rung, and the world was finally coming inside. The backyard was a patchwork of green grass and soft brown earth. Gabriel stood near the old oak tree. In his hand was a small wooden hammer. Beside him stood Parker. The boy was no longer wearing his expensive designer jacket. He wore an old oversized T-shirt of Gabriel's. His face was smudged with dirt, and for the first time he was not scowling. Under Gabriel's guidance, Parker was learning how to build. He was learning that wood required patience. If you hit the nail too hard, the wood would split. If you rushed the glue, the structure would tumble. Gabriel never raised his voice. When Parker grew frustrated and threw a block of wood, Gabriel simply sat down. He waited. He didn't lecture. He didn't punish. He just watched the clouds until Parker's breathing slowed down. "That wood is not your enemy, Parker," Gabriel said softly. "It is just waiting for you to show it what it can be." Parker looked at his hands. He had spent his whole life being told he was a problem. At school, teachers saw a bully. At home, Nanny saw a burden. But here, Gabriel saw a builder. The boy picked up the wood again. He placed it carefully. He tapped the nail gently. Tap, tap, tap. A small birdhouse began to take shape. While they worked, Mia watched from the porch. She held a small plastic watering can. Slowly, she moved toward them. She didn't grab Gabriel's leg this time. She sat near Parker and began to water the marigolds Gabriel had planted. The two children didn't talk much. They didn't have to. They were two broken pieces beginning to fit into a new puzzle. But as the sun began to dip low, the atmosphere shifted. The roar of a high-performance engine echoed through the quiet street. A sleek silver sports car pulled up to the curb. The engine growled before falling silent. The door opened, and Victoria stepped out. She looked like she belonged on a movie set. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her out of the car. He was young. His hair was slicked back with too much gel. His suit was tight and shiny. His name was Julian, or maybe it was Marcus. It didn't matter. He was the third different man Parker had seen in a month. He carried a large, brightly wrapped box. Victoria walked toward the fence, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Parker, honey, look what we brought you," she called out. Her voice was bright, but it sounded thin. It sounded like she was trying too hard to be happy. The man in the shiny suit stepped forward. "Hey there, champ," he said, flashing a toothy smile. "I got you the newest robotic dinosaur. It roars and shoots plastic missiles. Cool, right?" Parker didn't move. He looked at the expensive toy. Then he looked at the man. He knew what was happening. The toy was a bribe. It was a way to keep him quiet while they went to a fancy dinner. It was a way to make him look at the man instead of his mother. Parker looked down at his birdhouse. It was rough. The paint was uneven, but it was something he had made with his own hands. It was something he had shared with Gabriel. The man reached out to ruffle Parker's hair. Parker flinched away. He didn't want the toy. He didn't want the stranger's touch. He wanted to finish the roof of the birdhouse. Victoria looked at Gabriel. She saw his calloused hands. She saw the dirt on his jeans. Then she looked at her son. She saw the smudge on his cheek and the way he looked at Gabriel for permission to leave. A flicker of something like jealousy or perhaps regret crossed her face. "Is he being good?" Victoria asked. Gabriel nodded. "He is a hard worker, Victoria. He has a good eye for detail." The man in the suit laughed. "A hard worker. He is 5 years old." "Come on, kid, let's get in the car. Your mom has a table at the best steakhouse in the city." Parker didn't move toward the car. He turned to Gabriel. "Can I stay?" he whispered. His voice was trembling. Gabriel knelt down. "Your mom is here to take you home, Parker. We can finish the birdhouse tomorrow." "But I don't like it there," Parker said. The tears began to well up in his eyes. "It is too big. And it is cold. And there are always people I don't know." The boy looked at the silver car. He saw the man checking his reflection in the side mirror. He saw his mother looking at her watch. Suddenly, Parker began to sob. It wasn't a loud, angry tantrum. It was the quiet, hollow sound of a lonely heart. "I don't want the dinosaur," Parker cried. "I want to stay here with Uncle Gabriel." "He listens to me. He doesn't just give me things." The silence that followed was heavy. Victoria froze. The man in the suit looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight and looked at the expensive toy in his hand as if it were trash. Victoria looked at her son's tear-streaked face. She looked at the small, humble house. She looked at Mia, who had walked over to pat Parker's arm. For a moment, the fashion empire and the glass office didn't matter. She saw the truth in her son's eyes. She was giving him everything he wanted, but nothing that he needed. "I'm sorry, Parker," Victoria whispered. She reached out, but she didn't know how to comfort him. The man in the suit cleared his throat. "Look, Victoria, we're going to lose the reservation. Let's just get the kid in the car." Victoria looked at the man. She saw the shallowness she had ignored for weeks. She saw a man who didn't care about a crying child. She saw the reflection of her own empty life. "Go to the car," she told the man. Her voice was cold. "I'll be there in a minute." "But Victoria," the man protested. "Go," she snapped. The man shrugged, tossed the robotic dinosaur onto the porch, and walked away. The car door slammed. Victoria turned back to Gabriel. She looked tired. The mask of the powerful CEO was slipping. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing him. I think I have forgotten how to do that." Gabriel stood up. He didn't say it was okay. He didn't offer a platitude. He just nodded. "He is a good boy, Victoria. He just wants to be part of something real." Victoria took Parker's hand. The boy walked slowly toward the car. He didn't look back at the shiny toy on the porch. He looked back at the birdhouse, and he looked at Gabriel. That night, Gabriel sat on the porch. He looked at the robotic dinosaur lying in the shadows. It was a cold piece of plastic. He thought about the mansion on the hill. He thought about the lonely boy and the mother who was lost in her own success. He looked at Mia, who was sleeping peacefully inside. She was no longer clutching his shirt in her dreams. Gabriel realized that he wasn't just building birdhouses. He was building a bridge. And he hoped that one day Victoria would find the courage to walk across it. The seasons were shifting. The air in the suburban streets felt softer. Inside Gabriel's house, the yellow walls seemed to glow with a new kind of energy. It was no longer just a house. It was becoming a sanctuary. Victoria began to change her routine. The woman who used to arrive in a whirlwind of phone calls and stress started appearing early. At first, she made excuses. "A meeting finished early," she would say. "The traffic was light," she would claim. But soon, the excuses stopped. She would park her car and walk quietly toward the porch. She did not ring the bell. She would simply stand by the window or sit on the wooden steps. She watched. She watched Gabriel in the kitchen. He moved with a steady, quiet grace. He would hum a low tune while chopping carrots for a stew. He would laugh when a puff of flour landed on his nose. Victoria realized she had spent her life watching people perform for her. But Gabriel was not performing. He was just living. One afternoon she walked into the kitchen while he was stirring a pot. "It smells like my grandmother's house in here," she said softly. Gabriel looked up. He saw her standing there, her expensive silk scarf draped over her arm. She looked out of place among the mismatched mugs and wooden spoons, yet her eyes were peaceful. "Everyone deserves a meal that tastes like home," Gabriel replied. He offered her a taste from a wooden spoon. Victoria took it. The warmth of the broth filled her. It was simple. It was honest. In that moment, a spark of something deep and dangerous flickered between them. Gabriel felt it. He saw the way she looked at him. It was not the look of a boss or a client. It was the look of a woman who was beginning to see a future, and it terrified him. When Victoria left that evening, Gabriel sat alone at the table. He looked at the empty chair where his wife used to sit. He remembered the feeling of being left behind. He remembered the cold morning in 2024 when the house had suddenly turned silent. His wife had wanted more money, more excitement, a life that he could not provide with his warehouse salary. Victoria had everything his wife had ever wanted. She was successful. She was powerful. She lived in a world of high-rises and private jets. Why would a woman like that stay here, he thought. She is just visiting a different life. When she gets bored, she will go back to her glass tower. He decided right then to build a wall, not a wall of brick, but a wall of politeness. He would be kind. He would be professional. But he would not let her in. He could not survive being abandoned a second time, and, more importantly, Mia could not survive it. But while Gabriel was building walls, Mia was tearing hers down. The change in the little girl was a miracle. It was not because of a doctor or a medicine. It was because of a boy named Parker. Parker had become her shadow, but in a different way. He was no longer the angry child who threw toys. He was the protective older brother she never had. When they were in the garden, Parker would hold the heavy watering can for her. He would show her where the worms lived in the dirt. "Look, Mia," he would say, "they are just sleeping. Don't be scared." One afternoon, Gabriel stood by the back door. He held his breath. Mia was standing 10 feet away from him. She was not touching his leg. She was not clutching his shirt. She was laughing. Parker had found a butterfly near the fence. Mia ran toward him. She ran with her arms wide open. She forgot to look back and see if her father was still there. She was lost in the moment. She was a child again. Gabriel felt a tear sting his eye. His little girl was healing. She was learning that the world was not a place where people only disappeared. She was learning to trust the grass beneath her feet. Victoria joined him at the door. She stood close enough that he could smell her perfume. It was the scent of jasmine, and something expensive. "They make a good team, don't they?" she whispered. Gabriel cleared his throat and stepped an inch away. "They do," he said stiffly. "Parker has been a good influence." Victoria noticed the movement. She noticed the way he pulled back. She looked at his profile, the strong jaw, the tired eyes. She wanted to reach out and touch his hand. She wanted to tell him that she wasn't looking for a shortcut to happiness. She was looking for something real, but the silence between them was thick. Gabriel was a man who lived in the shadows of his past. Victoria was a woman who lived in the glare of her future. They were standing on the same porch, looking at the same children. But between them lay a vast invisible ocean. Gabriel turned back to the kitchen. "I should get the snacks ready," he said. "The kids will be hungry soon." Victoria stayed at the door. She watched the children playing. She felt the coldness of Gabriel's politeness. It hurt more than she expected. She realized that winning a business merger was easy, but earning the trust of a man who had lost everything was the hardest job she had ever faced. Inside, Gabriel focused on the task at hand. He sliced apples with precision. He focused on the rhythmic sound of the knife. Snap, snap, snap. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He was protecting his heart. He was protecting Mia. But as he looked out the window again, he saw Mia and Parker sitting on the grass. They were sharing a secret. Their heads were tucked together. They weren't afraid of the future. They weren't afraid of the walls. They were just two children in a garden waiting for the sun to set. Gabriel sighed. The wall around his heart was strong, but he could feel the foundations beginning to shake. The sky over the city was the color of bruised steel. Inside the boardroom of her empire, Victoria felt the walls closing in. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and cold betrayal. Across the long mahogany table sat the man she had trusted, the man she had called her partner, the man she had let into her home. He did not look her in the eye. He was busy looking at a stack of legal documents. Victoria realized too late that she had signed her life away. A fake investment, a hidden clause in a contract, a betrayal disguised as a business merger. In a single afternoon, the world Victoria had built began to crumble. The news spread like wildfire through the streets of the city. The stock plummeted. The bank accounts were frozen. The legal nightmare had begun. Victoria reached for her phone. Ko goi jien cho nhung ngoi ban tan hat. She called the people she had dined with at the most exclusive clubs. No one answered. She sent messages to her inner circle. Read receipts appeared, but no one replied. The high society she had served so faithfully had vanished. They did not want to be near a sinking ship. They did not want to be associated with a scandal. She stood in the middle of her marble lobby. The security guards looked away. The assistants who once rushed to get her coffee were now whispering in corners. She was no longer the queen. She was a liability. Victoria walked out of the building. Rain began to fall. It was a cold, biting rain that soaked through her silk suit. She drove her car toward the hills, toward the mansion she called home. But as she looked at the towering gates, She felt a wave of nausea. The house was empty. It was filled with expensive art, but no warmth. It was a museum of her own loneliness. She turned the car around. She drove away from the city. She drove toward the quiet suburb with the white picket fences. She drove toward the only place where she didn't feel like a number on a balance sheet. Gabriel was in the kitchen when he heard the car pull up. The sound of the engine was different this time. It wasn't the confident roar of a powerful woman. It was hesitant, stuttering. He opened the door and saw her. Victoria was standing on the porch. Her hair was matted with rain. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like a ghost. She was trembling so hard that she could barely hold her keys. Gabriel didn't ask what happened. He didn't check the news. He just stepped aside and opened the door wide. "Come in, Victoria," he said. His voice was steady. It was the sound of an anchor in a storm. He led her to the yellow room. He wrapped a warm wool blanket around her shoulders. He made a cup of hot tea and placed it in her shaking hands. For a long time, Victoria did not speak. She just stared at the steam rising from the cup. They took everything, she whispered finally. The company, the accounts, even the house is being audited. The people I thought loved me. They didn't even say goodbye. They just turned off their phones. She looked up at Gabriel. Her eyes were red and hollow. "I built my whole life on sand, didn't I? I thought if I was successful enough, I would be safe. I thought if I had enough money, Parker would be happy." But it was all a lie. Gabriel sat down on the small wooden chair opposite her. He looked at his own rough hands. "Wealth is like the tide, Victoria," he said softly. "It comes in and it goes out. You cannot control it. But there are things the tide cannot wash away." He pointed toward the hallway. In the next room, Parker and Mia were sitting on the floor. They were looking at a book together. Parker had his arm around Mia's shoulder. They were safe. They were happy. They didn't care about the stock market. They didn't care about the boardroom betrayal. "That is your foundation," Gabriel said. "A family is not built on a bank account. It is built on the moments when you choose to stay. You still have Parker. And you have a friend here." Victoria began to cry. It wasn't a quiet sob. It was a deep, guttural release of months of hidden pain. She cried for the time she had wasted. She cried for the betrayal. But mostly she cried because she realized she was finally home. Gabriel did not try to stop her. He let her cry until the room was quiet again. Then he stood up and began to prepare a simple dinner. The sound of the knife on the cutting board was rhythmic. The smell of roasting chicken filled the air. Victoria watched him. She saw a man who had lost his wife and his job, yet he was the strongest person she knew. He didn't have a mansion. He didn't have a title. But he had a peace that money could never buy. "I don't know what to do next," she said. Gabriel looked at her and smiled. The smile was small but filled with truth. "First we eat," he said. "Then we look at the morning. One day at a time, Victoria. That is how you survive a storm." Outside, the rain continued to lash against the windows. But inside the yellow room, the light was warm. The walls were strong. And for the first time in her life, Victoria didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was finally standing on solid ground. The morning sun rose over the suburbs. It felt different. The air did not carry the weight of deadlines or the noise of the city. Victoria stood on the porch of the small house. She held a cup of coffee. It was a simple ceramic mug, not the fine china she once owned. She watched the light play across the white picket fence. The storm had passed. The lawyers were gone. The corporate empire she once commanded was a memory. Victoria had made a choice. She did not try to fight for her old life. She did not try to reclaim the glass tower. Instead, she liquidated everything that remained. She sold the luxury cars. She sold the designer jewelry. She walked away from the cutthroat world that had betrayed her. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt light. She looked at Gabriel. He was in the yard repairing the gate. He worked with the same quiet strength he always had. "Gabriel," she called out softly. He stopped and looked up. He wiped his brow with a cloth. "I am not going back," she said. The words were firm. Gabriel walked over to her. He saw the peace in her eyes. "What will you do instead?" he asked. Victoria looked at the house. She looked at the yellow room. She looked at the way Parker and Mia were playing near the oak tree. "I want to build something that lasts," she said. "Not a company, a community. This town needs more than just a daycare. It needs a place where children are seen for who they are. It needs a school where hearts come first." Gabriel smiled. It was the widest smile she had ever seen on his face. "I think I have a few tools that could help with that," he said. The following months were a blur of purposeful action. They did not hurry. They took their time. They found an old abandoned building on the edge of the woods. It had large windows and a wide porch. Victoria used the last of her funds to purchase the land. Gabriel used his hands to bring the building back to life. Together they created the School of Hearts. It was not like the prestigious academies Parker had attended. There were no stiff uniforms. There were no harsh punishments. There were gardens to tend. There were birdhouses to build. There were lessons taught through kindness and patience. Word spread quickly. Parents who had once been skeptical of Gabriel began to visit. They saw the way Parker had changed from a wild storm into a gentle leader. They saw the way Mia had blossomed from a frightened shadow into a confident girl. Slowly the classrooms filled. The silence of the old building was replaced by the music of children laughing. Victoria was no longer a CEO. She was a teacher. She was a storyteller. She was a mother. She found that she was much better at managing a garden than a boardroom. She found that she preferred the smell of cedar wood to the smell of expensive perfume. One golden afternoon the school day was over. The last of the students had been picked up. The sun was hanging low in the sky, casting long amber shadows across the grass. Gabriel and Victoria sat together on a porch swing. The rhythmic creak of the chains was the only sound. Creak, creak, creak. Gabriel reached out and took her hand. His skin was rough. Her hand was no longer perfectly manicured. But they fit together perfectly. "Look," Gabriel whispered. In the middle of the yard, Mia and Parker were running. They were chasing a golden retriever that had wandered onto the property. They were fast. They were free. Suddenly the dog barked and ran toward the woods. Mia did not stop. She did not hesitate. She did not turn around to see if her father was still sitting on the porch. She did not check the locks. She simply ran, her laughter echoing through the trees. She was not afraid of the world anymore. She was not afraid of being alone, because she knew that when she came back, her home would still be there. And it was a home with two hearts waiting for her. Victoria leaned her head on Gabriel's shoulder. The glass tower felt like a dream from another lifetime. The betrayal was a ghost. The pain was the price they paid for this peace. "We did it," Victoria said. Gabriel squeezed her hand. "We are home," he replied. The sun finally dipped below the horizon. The stars began to blink in the vast American sky. The house with the white picket fence was quiet, but it was a good quiet. It was the quiet of a family that had finally found its way. In life, we often build walls out of gold or fear thinking they will keep us safe. But as Gabriel and Victoria discovered, true security is only found in the hands we hold and the hearts we choose to heal. If this journey of second chances touched your heart, please tell us where you are listening from today in the comments, whether it is your quiet hometown or a busy city. Your presence here means the world to us. Please subscribe to join our family for more touching tales, and click the video on your screen now to discover another story of hope and love.